town of Casper.
Yeah,
I thought the construction was very accurate and very just spot on. A lot of meticulous attention had been paid to doing that.
yeah, yeah.
That was the first.
I just had the pleasure, I mentioned that I recently, through the Facebook page, a fellow named Brian Buchanan is posting these images that he took when he was on location for 9 months, both at the Wallace, Idaho location. That's the town of
Sweetwater?
No,
Casper.
Casper, Wyoming, where the train comes in. So that was one set, and then Sweetwater was the other set that was in Montana. And he was on both those sets for 9 months, and he said when you would step on one of these sets, he said it was uncanny. It was like a time machine. You felt like you were in 1890, whatever. So, yeah.
I didn't see a Humane Society website on the screen.
No. The word is that it's often cited that it's because of this picture that the Humane Society noticed that you see at the end of pictures was created. I asked Brian about that actually, since he was there. I said, by the way, is it any of these stories true? And he said, he told me about one accident with a horse. He said where Woolcott, Ronnie Hawkins, gets on a horse and rides, and he rode the wrong direction, and a dynamite keg went off and really hurt the horse, and I think they may have killed it, or they had to put the horse down, and it meant that he didn't get killed, but it was an accident, and very likely on a production like this, I guess, and with him being in charge and being a closed set, there may not have, been as much care as we would like to think of as animals being cared for, but there was nothing intentional. They didn't go out of their way to hurt animals or needlessly. At least that's what Brian told me.
According to Bach's book, though, he did mention Stephen Bach's book, Final Cut, which was about the making of this film. He mentions that cockfight. What they were going to pull, I guess, because the film started to run over schedule. The superintendent of the park was going to pull the permits. And one of the reasons that they claimed they were going to pull the permits was because of, I believe, the cockfighting, because they said it was illegal in Montana. But I suppose if it was, I don't know if it was simulated. It didn't look simulated.
No. I think Cimino, in doing research, he would find little things like that, like, oh, there was cockfighting, or oh, there was roller skating, and he would think, gee, that's never really been shown in a picture before. I want to, show an accurate depiction of the West, or things that we absolutely have documentation, photographs, evidence, whatever, and he wanted to put those things in the picture, especially because you don't usually see them in the Hollywood versions of stories of the West. So I think he would get caught up in details like that and really want to show you that,
And he did say that everything in this film was based on a photograph at the time. Every piece of clothing,
Right.
Everything in this film.
Yeah.
Who was the president of that?
Benjamin Harrison.
Harrison?
Yeah.
Because he said it in the movies.
Right, exactly.
He never mentioned the president.
Yeah,
They did mention him. There was the one sequence when
At the end, but not when
they don't say his name, but they do say the president himself sent these men here.
Right.
And actually, I believe the original screenplay to the film, it actually had a quote from Harrison from the period.
Yeah.
And they were going to use it. I think the intention was to be like kind of a final subtitle on the movie, but then he didn't put it there. The ending of this print is different from any other version, except for the original VHS release too. In every other version of this film, it doesn't freeze frame on Kristofferson. He stops there for a moment, then he walks up to the bow of the boat, and then the final shot is him on the boat, and then it fades to black and the credits roll.
Right.
That last shot of Kristofferson, that's the question that bothered me. It was like they aged him artificially.
Yeah.
Was that intentional?
Yeah, that's another weird thing about this particular print of the film is any other version of the film that you see, there are intertitles at various points in the film. So in the very beginning of the film, it says Harvard College Commencement Ceremonies 1870. Then when he's on the train and there's that shot of the immigrants on top of the train, it says Wyoming 20 years later. And then at the very end of the film, when it cuts to him on the boat, it says, what is it,
It says that
1900?
in 1903, Newport,
Yeah.
Rhode Island, 1903.
1903, so
Yeah.
it supposedly jumps ahead another 13 years. So I guess the concept is that he's remembering this, he's back in his life of privilege, and he's remembering this time when he tried to do something good and tragedy befell him.
That's sort of like.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I wasn't paying close enough attention to when the color shifted from the sort of sepia tone into the more, just stark colors. At what point does that kind of take place?
and there's no defining place where it goes from sepia to color. It's just, I think the overall color scheme or palette that they wanted to end up with was to be one that was subdued and sort of like a pastel with a lot of sepia and amber. Yeah.
I was going to suggest, I think a lot of it was also shot in the golden hour. Cinematographers love shooting
Yes.
the first hour of the day and the
Yes.
last hour of the day because the light, the color is golden. And
Right.
Plus, it's the angle of the light. You get those great shafts of light, and that's why they used a lot of dust and smoke in the film as well, was to get the light sort of hitting those shafts.
Yeah, there's a lot of, both Cimino and Zsigmond are, you can tell, are very much in love with shafts of light coming through inside windows and things like that. But I know that, not that I know a lot about this kind of stuff, but I know that Zsigmond likes to use Tiffin filters, and he likes to do some sort of process. It started in the 60s of flashing
Yeah.
the film stock.
It's a process where they actually expose the negative to a tiny bit of light before they film the movie. And what it ends up doing is it lowers the contrast and it brings out the shadow detail more. And for the original Prince of Heaven's Gate, not only was the negative flash, they actually flashed the prints. So it had it not only on the negative but also on the prints. And if you see the Criterion put this out on Blu-ray and DVD, and it looks nothing like this.
No.
They went back. It's much more colorful. It's much more vibrant. And I think basically Cimino kind of decided he wanted to change the look of the film after all these years. I like this look better.
Yes, yeah.
Myself.
I think what happened was, he was coaxed by producer Joanne Corelli to revisit the picture. This film essentially destroyed his professional life in many ways. He only did a few films over a period of maybe a decade and a half after this, and then just petered out, and he hasn't been making films since. And so, he's been very reclusive, and he's somewhat enigmatic, and Corelli was trying with Criterion to first get the rights to the film, which was difficult, and then once they had those rights, they thought it'd be, trying to coax Cimino into being interested to come into the studio, and at the point that they finally got him to agree, he was very reluctant. When he finally said yes, then it was like, okay, but I'm in control now. It's not going to be, we're not going to hear other people's stories of what they contributed to the film or unless we approve it. And so there are people, even the people they did let, like someone like a David Mansfield, for example, on the Criterion disc, I understand from talking to an inside person who was working on the project, said we had this wonderful interview with him, and the interview's on the disc, but he said Joanne and Michael made us gut the interview and cut all kinds of stuff because they didn't agree with things that he said about how he came to do the music and all of that. And actually, I think a lot of that is in the notes that I did, the liner notes I did for the CD, because I interviewed Mansfield for that. And I've heard through the grapevine, actually from the same source, that Joanne wasn't especially happy about the fact that we didn't involve her with that or approach her. So, but anyway, yeah.
I think the sound is pretty extraordinary, even by contemporary standards. It's quite remarkable, and I've never really heard that before. The other thing I hadn't recalled is the level of violence, which was, almost like being spawned by Sam Peckinpah.
Yeah.
But the
Peckinpah visited the set, actually.
Oh, I
You
didn't
heard that
realize.
story, right?
No.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, I don't think he necessarily visited the set. This is a story I read it was an interview with Michael Cimino. this was the first time he kind of revisited this film, because in the early 1980s, there was a revival of this in England, and they showed a 70mm print, so it would have been basically the same version that we watched here. And Cimino actually